Good day, South Africa, and to everyone tuning into the Coalition to End Sexual Exploitation 2022 Africa Summit. Wherever you are in the world, my name is Rushelle Reid, and I am the Partnership Manager for the Mary Collins Foundation. I am honored to be a part of this salient discussion today. Please allow me to introduce you to the Mary Collins Foundation and the work that we do. The Mary Collins Foundation, or MCF for short, is a UK-based charity that is leading the charge both nationally and internationally related to the professional response when a child is sexually abused online. We are dedicated to supporting victims of technology-assisted child sexual abuse and exploitation on their recovery journeys to go on to living safe and fulfilling lives. We provide a voice for the victim and survivor community, and we support professionals who work with young people through training, mentorship, promoting the sharing of best practice. We advocate for victims and survivors by lobbying our expertise with governments and policymakers to improve safeguarding responses for victims and their families. Our work is based on sound evidence of need. Thus, we both commission and participate in academic research. We are committed to achieving our vision, which is that any child who is harmed by technology-assisted child sexual abuse will be supported throughout their recovery journey. We achieve this with a small but dedicated team of experienced professionals and an extensive network of trusted partners and affiliates around the world who actually share our vision. The principle that drives our work, our golden thread, if you like, states that if you place the needs of the child victim and their family at the center of any investigation or professional intervention, you are likely to better safeguard the child and to achieve an appropriate and proportionate response within the criminal justice system. Our value system both guides organizational culture and underpins our strategy, our business planning, and drives our decision-making and our communications. First and foremost, as you can probably guess, we are victim and survivor focused. We firmly believe in placing victims and survivors at the heart of MCF. In guiding our work and in informing our decision-making. We value the courage and the strengths of victims and survivors, creating and promoting tools and services that work, that are led by the expertise of those with lived life experiences, thereby empowering them to continue to help. We strongly believe in innovating and evolving to adapt to an ever-changing world and in influencing industry, academics, and other organizations to find new ways to ensure that victims not only survive, but that they also thrive. We cherish and we definitely believe in the power of partnerships and collaboration to improve the response to technology-assisted child sexual abuse and thereby improving outcomes, victims, and their families. For more information on our organization, including how you can engage with us, it will be given to you at the end of this presentation. Now, today, it is my pleasure to present you with an overview of the Mary Collins Foundation's Speaking Truth to Power project, a small-scale study geared at understanding effective practice in supporting victims and survivors of technology-assisted child sexual abuse. Now, in line with our ethos, as I previously described, I will remind you of some of MCF's core values, which will undoubtedly shed light on why this research came about. One, we aim to ensure that the global and standard response to children and their families who have been the victim of technology-assisted child sexual abuse is based on a sound, evidence-based practice. We're all too familiar with the concept that for many child victims of technology-assisted child sexual abuse, it can be months or often years before they're able to speak about the abuse that they've suffered. Research and practice have shown that there are many, many reasons for this. As was the case with our patient, this means that many victims are often well into their adulthood before they're able to call themselves survivors. It can take many years of support, intervention, therapy to help them on their journey from disclosure or discovery to recovery. And there's obviously a need to close that gap. We recognize that by virtue of this occurrence, the voice of the child is often missing when shaping the policy agenda and developing support services for the previously mentioned reasons. And a change is definitely long overdue. So why Speaking Truth to Power, right? Well, we established the Speaking Truth to Power project with the primary aim of starting to capture the voice of the child victim in research in order to address and to close the gaps that exist within the current systems. We are committed to achieving the following key objectives. One, we want to build a progressive movement and a global network of children and young people survivor groups that collectively becomes a recognizable international voice for young people and survivors of technology-assisted child sexual abuse, having fortified their experience with evidence-based best practice. And two, we want to promote a new global emphasis that places victim survival and recovery at the forefront of any response to technology-assisted child sexual abuse, so that children and young people across the world can access support services that helps them to recover. As a consequence, Mary Collins Foundation partnered with the Youth Research Unit within the Bureau of Market Research at the University of South Africa. And we developed and completed phases 1 and 2 of the Speaking Truth to Power project. We engaged with services working with victims and survivors of technology-assisted child sexual abuse, as well as youth engagement services primarily across 5 countries, speaking to those professionals working within those arenas. The countries that we engaged with were Canada, Namibia, South Africa, Ukraine, and Vietnam. And the purpose was to bring together the evidence about specific support needs of victims and survivors and what works when it came to engagement and empowerment in a variety of different cultural contexts. The 2 phases of the research or of our engagement involved 1, an academic literature review to identify the key themes and effective practices for delivering support services to victims and survivors of technology-assisted child sexual abuse, and towards youth engagement more broadly. And the second phase involved direct engagement with services working on the ground in each country to elucidate on what worked, where, limitations, as well as opportunities for development. So these countries that I've previously stated, Canada, Namibia, South Africa, Ukraine, and Vietnam, these countries were selected having regard to our strong networks of partners within those countries. Their membership of each country with the We Protect Global Alliance, which demonstrated their commitment to improving the management of child sexual abuse and exploitation as standard. And participants from these countries were identified through a purposive sampling approach, and some were also identified through the literature review. Now, taking a closer look at our African participants within the study. So those are the participants from Namibia and South Africa. We'll take a little side-by-side look of what the Speaking Truth to Power project taught us. Looking at the population size, South Africa is vastly larger than Namibia, with almost 60 million people living there in 2019, as opposed to the 2.56 million living in Namibia at the time that the research was conducted. Looking at the internet usage, 64% of the population in South Africa were online at that time, opposed to 52% of the population in Namibia. Looking at the level of threat from online child sexual abuse and exploitation, in 2019, the NECMEC cyber tip line received over 24,640 reports of suspected child sexual abuse and exploitation from Namibia. And in 2016, it was found that 51.2% of the children in South Africa who were online had seen sexual images in the past year, and 30% had received a sexual message. Making it a little bit more contemporary, just last year, the NECMEC cyber tip line received 906 reports of suspected child sexual exploitation in Namibia, and 50,875 in South Africa. It is safe to say, ladies and gentlemen, that both countries have a significant proportion of their population online. Thus, we will all know that where the internet is available, so too lies the risk of online harms against children. In both countries, child sexual abuse remains a serious and growing problem. We engage with 10 organizations or service providers within both of those countries. And we learned that already there are shining examples of good practice, good and effective practice in both countries. Of course, those services and those organizations remain more consistent in providing higher quality services with an injection of financial and human resources. Now, just what did the Speaking Truth to Power project tell us? So we're going to take a look at the findings of the study. The Speaking Truth to Power project identified themes from the research, and we were able to identify 12 themes of effective practice in delivering support services for victims and survivors of technology-assisted child sexual abuse that actually met their recovery needs. And these themes are benchmarked against a cohort of research participants for peer review, and so are credible and have been agreed by those who apply such practice and experience in providing support directly to victims or in youth engagement. So these themes were that a multi-sectoral approach was needed and multifaceted response was also needed. A victim and survivor focused approach must definitely be employed, and practices needed to engage and intervene with families and family members of victims and survivors. There needed to be a level of flexibility of services that alter their programs based on the specific needs of the types of the victims that they were interacting with. And services needed to provide specialized training for staff. There needed to be an understanding of the characteristics and the impact of technology-assisted child sexual abuse by staff. There needed to be an encouragement of victim and survivor participation. There needed to be no time limit. And victims and survivors needed to be empowered to have a voice about their experience. When we came to looking at the themes that were identified for youth engagement, you'll see no surprise here that a lot of the themes that we found for victims and survivors themselves were actually carried across to here. So you needed a youth-centered approach. You needed the provision of educational programs that were centered on the needs of young people. You need the provision of, again, ladies and gentlemen, specialized training for staff. We cannot stress that enough. Staff that are working with young people and that are working with victims and survivors definitely needs to be abreast of the issues, of the nuances, of the characteristics of the people that they were working with. And we need services that cater for young people's welfare as well as their personal development. And we need the support for young people who are also victims and survivors of child sexual abuse and exploitation. Definitely all of this needed multi-sectoral collaboration. Turning to the general findings of the research, we found that there were limitations to accessing funding, and this was a challenge for all organizations across all countries, so not just the ones in Africa, so not just Namibia and South Africa. However, the amount of funding at the disposal of each organization bore no correlation to the impact of the positive work that they were able to deliver. We found that organizations that prioritize developing their services against the themes identified were more likely to achieve more positive outcomes for service users. Further research is definitely needed to investigate whether any of these themes have a greater impact on victim and survivor recovery than others, although a suitably trained and equipped workforce deals specifically with technology-assisted child sexual abuse was seen as critical, as was the involvement of young people in the design and delivery of the services that actually affected them. Therefore, there were clear synergies of effective practices between victim and survivor services and preventative youth engagement services. Looking at the general findings and limitations, we found that we utilized a small sample size, therefore not representative enough to have large-scale applicability. And we only looked at English language literature review. Therefore, there's a potential oversight of good evidence due to language restriction. Of course, this study took place during the height of the COVID-19 crisis. Therefore, COVID-19 implications applied. We're talking about limited access to people, electronic fog, and of course, it meant that we were unable to benefit from the numerous advantages to be derived from face-to-face interactions, which would have occurred were we able to conduct the study in the participating countries. So practically, what implications does the Speaking Truth to Power project hold for the Mary Collins Foundation activity? Well, Mary Collins Foundation will support victim and survivor services in lobbying donors to award grants with longer time scales in order to have more time to create sustainable change. We will build the capacity and capability of victim and survivor support services to respond to technology-assisted child sexual abuse and exploitation through the rollout of our training packages, the CLIck Path to Protection, which has already seen over 500 persons trained in Namibia and Vietnam since the start of 2022 alone. MCF will continue to work with victim and survivor services and youth engagement services to develop programs that are informed by the target audience and do not lead to the creation of additional harm. MCF will continue to develop our technology-assisted child sexual abuse awareness packages for use in wider youth engagement projects. And we will definitely develop campaigns that challenge the stigmatizing and victim-blaming culture that silence children and have been shown to be a barrier to true recovery and healing. The Speaking Truth to Power project has evidence that there's still a lot of work out there to be done to support victims and survivors and young people globally. We still need to work to reduce the stigma surrounding technology-assisted child sexual abuse, which can definitely be a silencing factor, making it harder for victims and survivors to get the help that they need. We need to look to support services to find, we need to look to support services to find themselves providing a one-size-fits-all approach rather than being able to tailor services to fit individual needs, largely due to underfunding. And we need to better align the messaging from services that support victims and survivors of abuse and services working with youth engagement to ensure all young people are being educated about sexual abuse and exploitation, thus empowering them with the knowledge that they need to speak out. So with that said, the Speaking Truth to Power project, this part of the phases, these phases just marks the completion of these two phases. However, it is just the beginning, and it was a significant milestone for Mary Collins Foundation. The relationships that we've established and developed with other like-minded organizations will definitely set the direction and the momentum for developing a coordinated voice that will definitely influence change. So to those of you in this room, or those of you that are hearing my voice, we seek your collaboration as we continue on in this journey. If based on this presentation, you would like to partner with us to access our research, feel free, definitely feel free to email us at the addresses that are on screen. So that's gpn@marycollinsfoundation.org.uk or admin@marycollinsfoundation.org.uk. And you can visit our website at marycollinsfoundation.org.uk for more information. It has truly, definitely been a pleasure speaking with you today. Please let us know if you have any questions.